Welcome back to Comerit's What's Up Enterprise podcast, where we explore the latest technology trends across industries with the leading experts from around the globe. Today, I have a very special guest, Bryan DeBois from Rovisys. He's been with Rovisys for over 24 plus years, and this is going to be an exciting conversation. I could tell already just by looking through Bryan's background, but I'll let Bryan go ahead and tell us a little bit about what you've been doing for the last 20 plus years.
For sure. Thanks, David. Excited to be here. So if I look back over the last 24 years, I started at the company that I work for, Rovisys, in 2000 as a co-op. And I was a computer science major at the University of Akron and really knew nothing about the manufacturing and industrial space. And that's the area that we focus in here at Rovisys. We're a system integrator in that manufacturing industrial space. And so I came in as a computer scientist. I graduated in 2002 and started full-time here at Rovisys and started out programming and really kind of worked my way up. And so I was, working on programming on software projects, again, for manufacturing customers though, and then worked up to and now managing, software projects. And then I started to manage people. And that happened in 2013. And that was an interesting kind of turn of events because I had always thought that I wanted to stay technical. That was kind of my passion, was programming. I'd been programming since I was 12, 13 years old. And so the shift to managing people was significant, but and we can talk about that. But
Sure.
So that was interesting. And so then so I was a what we call a group manager. We were a pretty flat organization. So I was a group manager. So I had about a dozen developers that worked for me. And then in 2019, Rovisys hit our 30-year anniversary. And we said, okay, what's the next 30 years going to look like? And part of that was we said, we started a couple different initiatives, but one of those was industrial AI. We said we need a committed division that's just focused on pursuing industrial AI. And so I was fortunate enough to be named the director of that in 2019. So I've actually been at this industrial AI thing for about 5 years now. So I've got a really solid understanding of what's possible in the AI space. If you ask me about AI and finance, I'm not going to have any idea. But in the industrial space, I've got a pretty good handle on what is possible there. And what's been interesting, and of course, as we all know, in November of 2022, ChatGPT suddenly appears and the whole world gets introduced to this concept of generative AI and large language models. Yeah. And that has been really interesting because that suddenly, now my phone's ringing off the hook and everyone now has an AI initiative, even when, maybe before they were like, maybe not. Like now everyone's being asked by their CEO, what are we doing around AI? Right. And so I'm getting a lot more of those conversations going with customers. Now, interestingly enough, I typically talk to them a little bit about generative AI at the beginning of the meeting, but then I pivot pretty quickly because, and we can talk about this as well if you want, but like, I'm not convinced that generative AI is ready yet for the plant floor. I think that there's some significant issues with trying to use it on the plant floor. But what we do have is we have some AI offerings that are operational type of offerings that really solve the operational type of problems that we experience on the plant floor. And so we just pivot and we start talking about those things that we can deliver today with an eye to generative AI kind of in the future. So that's kind of how I've gotten to where I'm at.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, one of the reasons I really wanted to speak to you is because of your in-depth background within the manufacturing space. When we talk about AI, I mean, AI has been around a long time, but specifically using it in operational environments and stuff, it's kind of now taking root. Like you mentioned, yes. I think 100%. Probably ChatGPT did open up the eyes of many executives, right? It's like, yes. Whoa, I'm doing this stuff at home. But I had this conversation just the other day with another AI expert, and we were talking about there's the legacy AI, if you want to call it, but it's really AI that we've been using for computer vision, neural linguistics programming, that sort of thing. But whether or not the shop floors, the manufacturing floors are ready to utilize a generative AI type scenario, that still remains to be seen. And I wanted to have this discussion with you because, I want to hear your perspective. We certainly at Comerent, we certainly have a perspective because we focus a lot of our background started on the SAP side, which was SAP is very well utilized in the manufacturing space. So we
Yep.
have that background in common.
Mhm.
And just seeing what's, the possibilities. I think we're going to get a chance to talk about many different opportunities, but yeah, I mean, so you talk about some CEOs now, they're more open. Your phone started ringing off the hook. What
For
was
sure.
their initial impressions like? What was really getting them the call? Were they afraid that
Well,
technology
Well,
or
yeah, part of it was kind of FOMO, right? Like they're saying, if we're not doing AI, this is I'm messing around with ChatGPT. There's no question that generative AI was a revolution and has had and will continue to have an amazing impact on productivity and our day-to-day use, and all of that stuff is great. And I'm excited for the impact that generative AI is going to have, and that's what these CEOs were seeing.
yeah.
And so they're saying, how can we incorporate this? I'm seeing it's easy to see how ChatGPT can make it easy to write an email, and it can make it easy to build a PowerPoint, and it can make it easy to put together a marketing blurb. That's all great. And so they're calling me up and they're saying, how can we, and it's not the CEO calling me, but they're pushing that down.
Yeah,
And then
people who
someone at
are
the
like,
plant,
hey, you better learn about this, right?
right,
Keep
right.
me
And
informed.
yeah, and not for nothing, there's some budgets now attached
Yes.
to at least exploration around AI, so that's good. And so someone on the plant is calling me and saying, "Hey, I've been told I need to be doing something with AI. I can, and the common story is I can spell AI, but that's about it. Can you come in? Can you kind of brief us on what's possible? And can we talk about where we could potentially do some pilot type of projects around AI?" Great. So typically I come in, we talk about generative AI. And one of the challenges that I tell them right out of the gate with generative AI is that it was designed to solve knowledge type of problems. And those are great. And we find lots of those types of problems in the IT space, in the carpeted space of those manufacturing companies, certainly in the SAP world, ERP world, for sure. But what we have in the plan is we tend to have operational problems. And it's not designed to solve those. I mean, that's not even what it's trying to do. And so what that's about is making key decisions at key points in time based on data being fed to you in real time. And what really does that is what's called autonomous AI. It's it's related to like autonomous driving. It's a similar kind of concept, but that word autonomous is important there because the idea is that it can pretty much independently make decisions, human-like decisions, based on what it's seeing in the system, the current state of the system. So if the process is doing this, it can make a decision on what the next best move is. And honestly, that's the type of AI that they want. That's what they want AI to do, is they want it to make a decision on the plant floor. And so we pivot pretty quickly and we start talking about that autonomous AI for decision making.
Right. It's interesting. I wish I could remember the exact story. Someone was describing the difference between our human mind and even as far as advanced as we've gotten with autonomous AI. And they described a scenario, and I'm going to mess this up because I can't remember the full story, but about someone taking orders at a drive-through window.
Okay.
And they're, if AI was good, it could take orders and it would get the order right, all that stuff. But what it wouldn't capture is the observances, even if there's cameras out there, that a human makes when the line's starting to back up or someone's arguing in the line or something's happening. There's all these other parameters that are going on. And that should be the simplest place to replace someone, right there. No problem. This person takes orders. But yet there are things that I think as human beings, operationally, we still have an advantage. And I believe that that's going to be the case for a little while. It's incredible where we've reached today. I didn't go into the details, but I saw Elon Musk post the autonomous pick me up at the curb scenario where the car is now in a crowded parking lot at Costco. You have your groceries, you come out and you call your car, and it somehow avoids running over people and running over shopping carts and gets to you. That's not bad. But the other day I had, and I'm actually, well, I'll probably write something about this fantasy football or NFL coming up and using AI. I was using AI to help it do my picks for I don't do fantasy football, but I just do straight wins. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to pick what teams I think would win and then what the total score would be of the teams playing on Monday. So if two teams are playing, I'd need a higher score or whatnot. But pretty simple stuff. I just didn't have time to make my own picks, so I thought I'd throw it into a couple of different AIs to see what it would find out. And it was really interesting because as much as we've advanced, it still didn't. The first answer came out, it only listed 12 games and there were 16.
Yep.
Then it gave the advantage to certain players or teams because of certain players. And I had to say, that person plays for the Jets now. And they're like, oh, yeah, you're right. Now I was thinking, these are easy ones, right? These are layups. So you just go on the internet and realize where that individual is today.
Yeah.
But I took something very complex and it did it very, very well. But if I didn't know the answer it should be given to me, we could be in trouble if we were relying upon AIs this way.
100%. So let's dig into that because that's exactly the concern that I have about putting generative AI on the plant floor, right? So what you're describing is called hallucinations, and it's when the generative AI just makes stuff up, right?
Yeah.
So a perfect example of this, I ran this test against ChatGPT 3.5 a couple months ago, and I said, name for me the 13 dwarves in the original Snow White movie, in the original Disney Snow White movie.
Yeah.
Now, we all know that there weren't 13 dwarves, there were 7, right? And what it does is it says, oh, yeah, I can absolutely do that for you. And it makes this nice little numbered list. And the first 7 are the ones that we all would recognize. No. And then the next 6, it just made up. And they sound completely convincing. If you didn't know any better, you would think those were that the movie had 13 dwarves and here's all the names of them. Okay. The problem is, and so when it's something like that, or it's a marketing blurb, or it's, NFL picks or whatever, we can all laugh and it's like, who cares, funny, right?
Sure.
But on the plant floor, you could get somebody killed. And so one of the use cases that's being pushed really heavily by these generative AI vendors is, well, why don't we take all of your maintenance records, all of your SOPs, all of your manuals, all of the maintenance logs that you've gathered over decades. Let's feed them all into a generative AI model, and let's build a chatbot so that some less experienced maintenance person on the plant floor can ask it questions. But I mean, they're pushing this. At practically every vendor trade show I go to, there's a version of this that they're pushing.
Sure.
And it's so dangerous. And so this inexperienced person who wouldn't know any better is going to say, hey, this machine's down. How do I fix it? Now, whether or not it was ever trained on that machine, LLMs don't say, I don't know. They're not programmed to say, I don't know. So it's going to give you something, and it will sound absolutely convincing. I'll say, I know exactly how to fix that. What you're going to do is you're going to
sounds convincing.
Put this bolt, and you're going to do this, and you're going to rev the RPMs. You're going to put this in here, and you're going to do that, and you could blow up the plant. You could kill somebody. So it is not ready yet for use on the plant floor and honestly, look, even these OT vendors, when you press them, or these AI vendors, I should say, when you press them, they're even saying, oh yeah, don't use it for that. They know that they shouldn't be using it for that.
It's interesting. So our background has been really focused. We were really focused before Comerit. Our teams, our consulting capabilities were really hyper focused around the functional aspects of the transaction system within SAP.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, we started to realize that data was the most important thing if we were going to do automation or what we call insights to action.
Mm-hmm.
So prior to probably the last 3 years or so, we were really focused around organizing and getting people's data to a state where you could use it for this type of insight.
Mm-hmm.
Even after all that, and I've watched our company's been in existence now for about 15 years, and we've helped people organize and get their data ready to make decisions. And I think we did a fantastic job. The reality is that data continues to grow in size and variation. So when what we're finding is that a lot of people are hesitant, organizations are hesitant to move forward because their data is not ready.
Right.
And that's where we're like, oh man, that's right. You need to be able to just do basic data reporting at the moment.
Right.
Get that done first before you try to apply some automation to it.
Yeah. And I was
yeah,
going to say, so you and I were talking kind of before we started recording about how, and if you're saying that in the IT space, the ERP space, the business system space, it's even worse on the plant floor. So we call, by the way, so I'll use this term so your listeners know, OT is operational technology. So that describes the world that I live in. That's the world of the plant floor. It typically is something's moving or acting based on data. So that's OT. In that OT space that I operate in, it's an even worse story. You've got massive data silos. You've got zero integration between these different systems. I mean, I'm still doing projects today where we're just now networking some of these assets and some of these pieces of equipment. There was never any network connected to it. So all of the data coming from it was either manually collected, it wasn't collected at all. I mean, thankfully, I haven't seen any paper. There used to be paper logs that it would literally print it, the data over time and it would go into a box. I haven't seen any of those lately. But yeah, I mean, that's the world of OT. I mean, we did a project probably 5 years ago that replaced an NT4 server, a Microsoft NT4 server still in operation on the plant floor. Part of that is because in the manufacturing world, they're very risk averse for good reason, and they don't upgrade very often. So you've got 20, 30 plus year old pieces of equipment. And that's kind of the world that we live in. And so it's so funny to hear you say, like, they don't have their data story. And I mean, I'll tell you, the OT data story is even worse. So part of what we do is to put those OT data infrastructures in place to start to collect that data, correlate that data. And then oftentimes, a lot of my customers, now this is interesting, a lot of my customers are comfortable with moving that data to the cloud. You wouldn't think that, that manufacturers would be that comfortable, but the alternative, honestly, because the volume of data, like you said, is so large, the alternative is to build big data centers on premise, and they don't have the appetite for that anymore. So they are willing to move the data up into the cloud, which is great because now at least it's up there, and now we can kind of it's close to the other analytic tools that are up there, so we can start to do some stuff with it.
Yeah. So I had this conversation on one of my last podcasts. Also, I don't know if you caught the session where Jensen Wang from NVIDIA, he's talking about where they are observing entire plant floors and recording it and then rebuilding that entire construct within a digital environment. And I thought, wow, that's interesting because there are operations that don't have systems that are attached that provide data, but there is visual cues. So someone is taking a manual note on those things. However, if we could observe all angles, auditory, movement, and people, is it possible that that's where our optimization could come from? Well, that's what I thought they were doing. I still think that's probably part of it. But I also know, given what I've been researching around robotics, automation, that the other part of studying those constructs and looking at that is I have no doubt that part of it is where can we replace the human aspect with robotics? Because if you can get a full recording of all the data, all the happenings and transactions, the OT on the shop floor, then you could start to do some automation, or you can look at places where you can do automation.
Well, and so I do like to address that concern head on because it's the nature of the role that I have, right? So I'm the director of industrial AI. So one of the most common questions I get is, are you putting people out of work, right? So let's address that. So the reality of it is that, and I just looked recently, the most recent Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that their numbers show that we are about a 500,000 person shortfall in the manufacturing space. Absolutely. They can't find enough people. There's nobody wants to do this. And I mean, like, I'm hearing that over and over again from client after client that we can't find enough people. We have high turnover. We've got 6 month and to 1 year people in these positions, if that. And you know, it is a generation. There's a generational aspect to it, and we could wish that it wasn't that way, but it just is. And so we just have to move forward now and live with the fact that folks are not going to want to commit a decade plus of their life to learning how to run this part of the process. So we have to adopt AI. I mean, we really don't have much of a choice. And so, no, we're not putting, I don't think I've ever in my whole career here, I can't remember a single project where it led to labor reduction. What it ended up leading to in a lot of cases is people moving into roles where they're adding more value to the organization.
That's
right?
Absolutely.
Where with automation, instead of maybe tending one line, they can tend 3 lines, or, you know, we're able to maybe automate some of that reporting. And so instead of spending 4, 6, 8+ hours a week on building some of these reports, the report gets generated in 4 seconds. And that person now can do follow-up with customers, or could, you know, do the more value add type of roles that we want them doing.
Yeah. And I'd like to emphasize the point where if you can automate those things that take us away from the human interaction,
yes,
I think there's a major benefit. I think that we'll see major improvements in how we support customers because people are being able to be human. There are so many aspects, and this is what I love. I love artificial intelligence. I love automation. I love people even more because there's just something you get further. Even if the super intelligence is smarter, there's intuition, there's empathy, sympathy. There's all these little things that is so hard to calculate the value and benefit that we get. And I think automation, doing artificial intelligence, we're going to see a revival around the interest that humans have in one another in their capabilities. And I'll give you, this is a non-technical discussion, but I witnessed this thing. I'm very fascinated by the amount of the art, the kind of art, the realism, and the things that it can do. There's a certain style I love that I can now generate on my own. What I realized what was happening though, and I can do this in music too, which is super fun. It's increasing the value of a human's ability to do it. So like now when I look at this one artist that I absolutely love, he's a Hawaiian artist, Roy Tabor. I'll give him some credit. Phenomenal paintings. Now when I look at his stuff, my appreciation for what he's actually doing compared to what I can do on the AI is just through the roof now. Same goes for I'm now working with a number of musicians just because, you know, they want to understand how technology might impact them. And I'm starting to realize, geez, you know, artificial intelligence is very valuable, especially if you have repetitive processes that make sense. Just let it automate, do those things. But for anything outside of that, where there is an element that I still don't believe we understand, which is the human element. And I'm excited for the future because I think we can automate those things that make sense to automate. And we will start to see and accelerate the value that humans are bringing to the table. That's what's exciting tonight. And I'm glad you brought up that point because I still hear people. I saw even yesterday, someone said, my job, I was replaced yesterday by AI. And in his case, it was very real. A person was a graphic artist who had been the graphic artist for this company's brand for the last 15 years, but they just uploaded all this stuff and they're like, yeah, new renditions of that, we don't need them. And in that case, it was very, very real. I don't have an answer for that, but I can say the other instances that we're discussing now, I really do see that not only are we going to have a technological advancements and improvement, I believe we're going to have an appreciation increase over the next few years, the more that we rely upon automation. But I wanted to ask you, because I know you also do some public speaking. and you have some events that you're going to be speaking at. Can you talk about those at all and what you're?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I'm speaking. So I tend to speak at more like trade shows around manufacturing. So I'm speaking at the Association for Iron and Steel Technology. They do their digital transformation forum in Pittsburgh. So that's going to be, I think, next month. And I'll be speaking there. Also speaking at Vinyl Tech, which is a big PVC and vinyl kind of show. So for those types of manufacturers. And so going to be speaking there in both cases, talking about industrial AI, talking about a lot of the stuff that we're talking about today, what's possible. You know, a lot of the folks in the audience, like I said, I mean, they may not even really understand what their peers are doing and what is possible. And so I'm really trying to light that spark and get people excited about what they can do. And then I've got one more that I'm doing in December, down in, I think it's called Gwinnett County, outside of Atlanta. They're doing a tech day. And so I'm keynoting at that. So yeah, I love to spread these ideas and get people excited about it.
What's your big message for people who haven't, they're on the cusp. They know they need to learn about it.
Yes.
What are you going to be saying to people out there?
Well, I end every presentation. Again, you understand the audience, right? These are people who are manufacturing, companies, and so they're looking to, they're considering taking this first step, but there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of uncertainty, and so there's a lot of trepidation about taking that first step. And so I end every presentation by saying to them, look, whether or not you think you're ready or not, your peers are taking these first steps on this journey. Your competitors are taking this first step, because in a lot of cases, I'm kind of working with them. So I know who the folks are who are taking these first steps in this journey. And so what I try to assure them is take the first step. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to go and deploy AI across your whole enterprise, right? But take that first step. And maybe that first step is just infrastructure upgrades. Maybe that first step is just data readiness, right?
Yep.
I'm not saying you have to go full bore into AI, but take that first step. And then some of the other advice I give them is start small and build on your successes. Walk before you run, right? Which is a different message than they're typically getting from the big AI vendors or the big IT consultancies, right? That are saying, give us 20 million and we'll give you AI.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the exact different message. We're saying start small, build a snowball of ROI, small successes building to get to bigger ROI and bigger successes, and de-risk all along the way. And then I do say, and I know it sounds self-serving, but I do say get an OT system integrator involved, even if it's not Rovisys, because one of the great things about working with an independent system integrator is that we're not tied to any one platform. We don't, if you talk to just an IT vendor in this space or an AI vendor in this space, they've got a hammer. And so everything's got to look like a nail to them. And versus we can go in any direction you want. Like if it turns out, we start talking about AI, but then we discover that there's some data readiness holes, we can go and pivot the conversation and build a project around doing that, right? So we can go in any direction that is necessary. And so, I do advise them, get an OT system integrator that you trust involved on this journey.
I agree. And I love the, just get started. It doesn't have to be this big thing. As I know that there are many organizations out there pitching that big dream, the utopia of artificial intelligence, right? So let's talk about something a little bit outside. I like to ask my guests about this. As we're wrapping up here, we've got a few minutes, and I would like to talk to you a little bit about this. So what is your thoughts on whether or not there is something really called AGI or super intelligence? What are your thoughts or opinions about those ever occurring?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And it's one that I think anyone involved in AI thinks about a lot. And, for your listeners who may not, be familiar with that term, effectively, that would be a human parody of intelligence, right? So not just in a lot of ways, oh man, there's so much I can say about this. So
go for it. I'm going to let you go over the clock a little. Go ahead.
In computer science, so now 20 plus years ago, when I'm in college, right, and I'm going in and getting my computer science degree, one of the things they teach us is what's called the Turing test. And so Alan Turing, who you can watch the movie, and I just lost
Ex Machina.
Yeah, no, the the movie that he did or that they did about his life. But you can watch this movie. But amazing individual. His impact on computer science, I mean, we're still feeling today. But one of the things that he proposed was this idea of the Turing test. And briefly, what it means is that if I put a computer on one side and I'm in a room and I can't see who I'm chatting with, and I'm chatting with a human and I'm chatting with a computer, and I can't tell the difference between those two, effectively, what he characterizes, he said effectively that then we've achieved artificial intelligence, right? Because if I can't tell the difference as a human between, chatting, now, okay, we've achieved intelligence. Well, it's interesting because now with the advent of ChatGPT, I think what we found is that in a lot of ways, these ChatGPT bots can pass the Turing test.
Oh, yeah.
But we very quickly have found out they are not some sort of artificial general intelligence. They can't even make decisions. All they really do is they're just a supercharged autocomplete. They're very good at picking the next word. That's it. That's all it does.
Autocomplete.
It doesn't even know what the words are that it's saying. All it knows is that this word typically, probabilistically, follows the word before it. Like, that's it. That's all it knows.
That's amazing.
Right. So when you think about that, so what that has kind of said to me then is that, okay, so we passed the Turing test and we found out that that's not the bar. And so in some ways, I wonder if as we continue to find more and more intelligent AI and we continue to research and we discover, we make these new discoveries around AI, is that going to be what it's going to look like, where effectively we're constantly actually raising the bar and we think we've achieved AGI and then we very quickly discover, oh, it's not even as capable as my 5-year-old. And so we've got to raise the bar more. And you brought up that perfect example of like, we can't even replace what would typically be a 16-year-old kid running a drive-through.
Right.
We can't even replace that person with AI yet. So let's not kid ourselves that we're all that close yet to Skynet or to an artificial general intelligence, a human parody of intelligence. I think we're still pretty far away. I think that we continue to make great strides. I get super excited about that. I love exactly what you said, the application of AI to the monotony of everyday life and to those tasks that we don't like to do as humans. I see it as increasing our ability to do the tasks we want to do, which are those creative things that make us human, that I get so excited about. Let's automate all the other stuff. Let's increase our leisure time, right? Like, let's make sure that, we take for granted now that people work 40 hours a week, but that wasn't always the case, right? That was a thing that technology helped bring about. So let's get to 32 hours a week. Let's get to 30 hours a week. Right?
I love it. Those are great goals. Yeah.
Let's make human life better through the application of this technology. We'll get there. I don't know. We may get there with AGI and all that, but right now, like, let's just apply this AI and let's make human lives better.
I love that goal. Let's get to 20 hours. Why not?
Yeah.
32 would be good, but I say 20 is the right amount. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Bryan, thank you so much for joining me over here at the What's Up Enterprise podcast. Fantastic. I'd love to have you back on again.
Anytime.
Talk about your experiences out there on your speaking engagements, but really appreciate your time. And I look forward to our next conversation.
Thanks, David.